Marqeaux Hemingway was truly an American original. She was the granddaughter of literary legend Ernest Hemingway, and in many ways, his feminine incarnation. She was adventurous, bold, and extraordinarily beautiful. She lived a life of outward exuberance and inner torment.
She had all these crosses to bear really early in life.
Marqeaux was one of the very first supermodels. She became an icon overnight. She was also an actress and filmmaker. And her intriguing life played out against some of the world's most glamorous backdrops, from the royal palaces of Europe to the rainforests of South America. In her own way, Marqeaux was also a trailblazer. In navigating her life, she achieved many firsts, and in doing so, made it easier for the women who followed her, even her own sister Mariel. But for Marqeaux, fame came with a heavy price.
I heard you or Mariel or both of you at some point said, "Don't worry, Daddy, I'll never change." But you do.
Her meteoric rise thrust her into a jet-set world she was not prepared for. She turned to alcohol, drugs, and bulimia to mask her low self-esteem.
So it was hard for her, because you'd look in the mirror and see one thing, and inside she didn't feel what she saw.
Who knows what demons followed her around every day?
She watched her career fizzle and 2 marriages fail. But after years of self-abuse, Marqeaux battled back.
Okay, I can kill myself. It seemed like a pretty good option, but there's one idea. Maybe I'll try life again.
One by one, she conquered her addictions. Then, the ultimate irony. On July 1st, 1996, when it seemed that Marqeaux had finally overcome her demons, her body was found in her Santa Monica apartment. The coroner ruled it a suicide, but to this day, many of her closest friends adamantly disagree. For the next 2 hours, Marqeaux's life story unfolds through exclusive interviews, never-before-seen footage, and Marqeaux's own words in audio reenactments. We'll hear from Sister Mariel Hemingway and Father Jack, as well as models Cheryl Teagues and Beverly Johnson, celebrity photographer Francesco Scavullo, film director Lamont Johnson. Lifelong friends, lovers, and business associates all look back at the amazing life and tragic death of Marqeaux Hemingway. The city of Portland, Oregon is known as the City of Roses. And it was here on a clear February day in 1955 that a true American beauty was born. Her name was Marqeaux Byra Hemingway. And from first blush, she delighted everyone with her vivacity and charm. Her father, Jack, raised in Paris and Idaho, was a consummate outdoorsman. He often indulged his passion for fly fishing with young Marqeaux in tow. Her mother, Byra, also from Idaho, was of Native American descent. She was nicknamed Puck, short for Puckana, meaning little one. Marqeaux also had an older sister, Joan, whom the family called Muffet. And she also had a very special grandfather, whom the world called Papa. Ernest Hemingway was one of the most colorful figures in American literature. A vivid writer, author of more than 60 novels and short stories, he was honored with both Pulitzer and Nobel Prizes. Hemingway lived life as passionately as he wrote. He was an international bon vivant whose hunting and fishing exploits were legendary. Throughout his life, he lived in Europe, Cuba, and Key West, but it was Sun Valley, Idaho that became his final home. Marqeaux spoke of him often, with pride, as we hear in this audio reenactment.
I was very small, but I feel like I've had a real communication in his spirit. He loved the great outdoors, and I've been given that gift, being a Hemingway, loving the great outdoors and living life to the fullest.
Ernest Hemingway died in 1961, when Marqeaux was only 6. And it wasn't until her teen years that she learned what the world already knew, that after a long battle with alcohol and depression, Grandpapa had died by his own hand. Marqeaux would face her own battles with alcohol in later years. Several months after Ernest's suicide, Margot's younger sister, Mariel, was born, and the family celebrated a new life. By the mid-60s, Margot's father, Jack, was enjoying modest success as a stockbroker in San Francisco and had moved his young family to Mill Valley, an affluent suburb. The girls had a comfortable living, They traveled and excelled in sports. But they themselves were not famous. Well, except on the home stage. Marqeaux attended a nearby private school called Marin Country Day and attracted friends like B. Kilgore with her personality, not her pedigree.
There was something about Marqeaux that was very magnetic, and she was a very happy, upbeat girl. So I just remember, you know, going up and saying hi to her, and we started laughing and just became friends. I don't think Marqeaux and I really ever flourished in our academia. She was more artistic. I remember, you know, specifically her loving to draw on the chalkboard, and she loved music.
Former music teacher Barry Minia recalls.
Marqeaux sang well. I remember this. She could have been a singer. She had a sweet voice. It wasn't a big voice at that time, and it was, she had a little bit, as I remember, kind of a little smoky quality to it.
But in terms of aspirations for our future, that I don't remember anything coming up that was specific for her. I mean, modeling for sure never came up. Marqeaux and I were definitely the tomboys in the class. Our life really consisted of being outside, and it didn't matter what we looked like.
But tomboys or not, girls will be girls.
I think we probably had crushes on older classmen. We secretly would spy on them and you know, follow them around.
But the real man in Margot's life was her father, Jack.
Her father was very involved in Margot's life, as I think he was with, you know, all the kids. But, you know, she would sort of be her father's buddy, and maybe she was the son he never had. I don't know really how close she was to her mother. I think they had a real sense of family values. I mean, Marqeaux used to write thank you notes after she'd spent the weekend here.
In the Hemingway home, character was indeed paramount.
I took her on a camping trip. This is one of the things I used to do with kids, is take them up in the mountains and backpack or just roam around. And we went up to the Stanislaus River in the Sierra. One of the boys in the camp was throwing stones. And I told him in no uncertain terms, you don't throw rocks. Well, he threw one last rock, and Marqeaux stood up and caught the rock right in the side of the face. I was scared to death. She was having a little blood out of the mouth, but she didn't cry. She was absolutely brave and kind of physically unusual that way.
I was always taught that it was Hemingway-esque to take your blows stoically.
There was one weekend where she came over to the house to spend the weekend, and her parents had gone away. And Marqeaux told my dad that she had forgotten her think pills. And so my father said, well, sweetheart, you know, what are your think pills?
Margot's think pills were Dilantin, a medicine commonly used for the treatment of epilepsy. She had been diagnosed with the disease at age 7, and the illness had impaired her learning. Father Jack Hemingway remembers.
Would cause, you know, her brain to blank out because of her concentration span was extremely short. She was a very poor student. But like a lot of people with disability of that kind, she made up for it by, you know, being rather quick about things.
She left after the 6th grade. So that was very sad for me because she was such a close friend. I don't think in this day and age you can build friendships like you could as a child.
In 1967, Jack accepted a position with Idaho's Fish and Game Commission and built a new house for the family in Ketchum, a small town in their grandpapa's beloved Sun Valley. Sun Valley had been a popular Hollywood resort since the 30s, and both Ernest and Jack were local celebrities. While the family organized the move, the 12-year-old Marqeaux went out ahead and stayed with her godfather at the Tamarack Lodge, where she met Dusty Bell.
You know, Sun Valley was sort of our territory. It was, you know, it was all guest people then. You know, there weren't that many people that lived up there, so.
Marqeaux had finally discovered a playground grand enough to satisfy her Hemingway appetite for adventure. She and her new friends rode horses, camped out, hunted, fished, and hitchhiked their way all over the valley. In the winters, they burned up the slopes, and in the summers, they cooled down in the streams.
We used to swim here. In fact, this is Hemingway Hole. Smoke our first cigarettes, you know, get dizzy. Wow. Innocent young summers.
But soon, Margot discovered some new watering holes and new friends like Paula and Dave Baravetto.
She followed me into the Pioneer, I believe, was what happened. And I think she just saw a new tall guy in town, and she wanted to do some investigation. And I was in there talking with some friends, and this little pixie face just came bounding in, and everybody introduced me, and I was amazed by the poise and the character and the dynamic charm that this 15-year-old girl had.
She was like a free spirit, always. You know, I think that's why we were attracted to each other, because I was that way too, and I came up here, it was like, wow, anything goes. It was just a whole new world, and she was just that way always. Very free and couldn't wait, always exploring and waiting for life to grab her.
She had a good imagination, too. She could tell a story, but you never quite knew if they were true or not. You know.
The art of fiction was in Margot's genes. In fact, she had been named Margot G.O.T. after a heroine in her grandfather's prose. But according to her, she had really been named after the heady Chateau Margaux that her parents shared on the night of her conception. So she changed the spelling accordingly.
I mean, that was part of her spontaneity. I think I'll be Margot with an X.
In a very short time, Margot and her sisters had become Sun Valley celebrities in their own right. Muffet was a budding tennis prodigy, and Mariel a promising ski racer. But while both girls also excelled in school, Margot floundered.
She had a hard time in school. I think she had a learning disability, which people didn't recognize really in the late 60s and early 70s. And I think she always thought she was stupid, which she wasn't.
In her junior year, Margot transferred to a private boarding school in Portland. But to her parents' dismay, she dropped out within the year. She later enrolled in art classes at the University of Oregon, but again left abruptly.
Although she wasn't a good student, she was really ready for the world way ahead of time.
So Margot returned to Ketchup and spent her late teens drifting in and out of part-time jobs and cowboy bars, and reveling in the counterculture that had enveloped Sun Valley.
It was adolescent paradise. It was just so much fun because it was totally uninhibited. Society at that time had a sense of humor. There wasn't the oppression. There wasn't the intolerance that you deal with now. It was wide open.
It was day of marijuana. Everyone smoked marijuana, psilocybin, mushrooms. In a resort area like this, it was just the way it was. It wasn't really that Margot and all her friends and us were a bunch of drug addicts, but that's just how it was up here. It was, you go in a restaurant, sometimes you get psilocybin on your dessert. And of course later, we were all met in the rooms of AA up here, but that's just how it was. That was our generation.
Like many members of that generation, Margot would suffer the consequences of that freewheeling atmosphere. By age 19, Margot had grown into a uniquely beautiful woman, a wild sunflower, nearly 6 feet tall, or 5'12", as she put it. She decided to try her hand at showbiz and approached talent agent Sandy Mirisch with a proposition.
I first met Margot on the top of Mount Baldy in Sun Valley, and a friend Rebel had introduced us, and she said to me on the top of the mountain, you know, let's race. And if I win, you have to take me to Hollywood. But if you win, I'll take you home for dinner. So she went.
Margot entered the world of modeling all right, but for some reason her early photographs were not well received. So instead, she and Sandy decided to become publicity agents for local Idaho sporting events.
We decided to try and have an excuse to go to New York. We decided we'd promote a freestyle ski event. We were at the Plaza Hotel, and we were sitting having tea, and she decided to go up to the room, and I made a phone call in the lobby, and I had a tap on the back of my shoulder, and it was a nice-looking gentleman named Errol Wetson with a red rose in his hand. And he wanted to know who that gorgeous woman was that was sitting next to me.
He was good-looking, and he seemed like a man of the world. I was basically a little spit in cowboy boots going yippee, skippy, and yahoo. He knocked on my door with a rose and a bottle of champagne, and I fell in love.
When we return,
Just overnight, she became this unbelievable star, and everybody was talking about her, and everybody wanted to meet her and touch her, and that whole gravity that she had.
And later,
when we saw that smiling, fabulous face, I had no idea about the things that haunted her.
In her late teens, a restless Marqeaux Hemingway dropped out of high school and went seeking her fortune. She tagged along on a publicity trip to New York and was spotted by entrepreneur Errol Whetson at the Plaza Hotel. The worldly Whetson showered her with roses in hot pursuit. Throughout the summer of '74, Marqeaux maintained a long-distance rapport with her big city beau. Errol Whetson was a sophisticated businessman whose family had founded the Whetson hamburger chain. He was 15 years older than Marqeaux and quite a man of the world. Marqeaux was swept off her feet, and after 3 months back west, she flew to New York to be with him. The smitten Mr. Whetson took her to stay with his friend, artist Zachary Zelig.
Her hair was all pulled back in a ponytail with bangs, and she was wearing big fried boots with, I think, jeans stuck into them, and she walked in and she said, "Howdy." And her eyes were beaming, and she was just glowing. The next day, Errol started to ask me to introduce her to all of the business and social networks of individuals that I knew, particularly in Manhattan at that time. And here I was working in this fashion industry that, quite frankly, I found to be boring and phony. She took them off guard. Now, who is this girl, Marqeaux Hemingway? She's really fat, and her eyebrows are so thick, and I mean, just negative, 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 negative. Marqeaux was completely and totally naive. I mean, she was just out to have a good time, and whatever was going to be fun, she was going to do.
In this audio reenactment, Marqeaux recalls those early days.
Oh, I'm just a country girl, really. When I got to New York and started modeling, they got so mad when I wouldn't take off 40 pounds. I just told them, take me as I am.
I called Wilhelmina, and Wilhelmina was the first person to sign her on. No one else wanted to take her.
That was until Zachary and Errol's networking brought Marqeaux to the attention of two of the fashion world's biggest kingpins, designer Halston and photographer Francesco Scavullo.
Oh, I remember very well how I first met Marqeaux. I was at a party at Halston. I think he gave the party to introduce Marqeaux to New York. And I went there, and standing up at the top of the steps was this fabulous girl, absolutely smiling with a smile. I never saw a smile like that in my life before. There were stars flying out of her mouth. I was under contract to Vogue at that time. So I thought, oh, I got to run to Vogue and tell them about Marqeaux Hemingway. She's incredible.
She was totally charismatic. She had that capacity to touch everyone's heart. And I think the designers and photographers saw that. And then, of course, along with that, the editors and the magazines and what have you followed.
Fashion editor Marion McAvoy recalls.
You know, word had gotten around at that point that Marqeaux was new hot ticket in town. And I think I might have mentioned it to John Fairchild or Michael Cody, who's the editor at that time, and I said, fine, go interview her. Set it up.
So Marqeaux landed her first big interview with the fashion industry Bible, Women's Wear Daily. By this time, she and Errol had moved into the apartment of another society friend, Egon von Furstenberg.
She was wearing a sort of large caftan situation. She was bigger than life in every sense of the term. A giant, big, wide, toothy smile, eyes that literally pop, sparks sort of coming out of them, big eyebrows. You know, again, very unslick, unstyled. You know, when she said, hi, y'all, you know, how y'all zippity-doo-dah or whatever, I just thought, hello? But it was for real. She, I don't think, realized how beautiful she was, how honest and sort of straightforward she was. She didn't know how different she was from most people in New York.
You know, it was New York 1974, and Manhattan was in a recession, and everybody was crying the blues, and it was not a particularly upbeat time. People were looking and searching for imagery, and they were looking for, you know, something new and something different. So in about a month, we just literally turned New York City upside down.
Women's Wear Daily ran Margot's story on the front and back covers, and through subsequent stories kept her there for months. About the same time, her name started making noise around town, and other models, like Beverly Johnson, heard it.
I was working for Francesco Scavullo, and there was all of this noise about Marqeaux Hemingway and this great beauty that's coming into the business, and she was very warm and very much not like what I expected. This nice big country girl came bopping in there.
I had sittings with her. I couldn't wait for her to come because she'd light up the whole room. She'd come in with that smile. Hi, Francesca. How you doing? And that voice. Oh, how are you? I'm fine as wine, fine as wine. I thought she was just going to be the sunshine girl.
Good. Good.
Supermodel Cheryl Teagues recalls.
The first time I met Marqeaux Hemingway was in Cancun, Mexico. We were doing a Sports Illustrated shoot, and she was coming down, and I was quite excited to meet this person who I'd heard a lot about. The other girls, you know, we were all laying on the beach being very glamorous, but there she goes, you know, she's up there on the water skis, and she's climbing the mountains, and she's doing all these things. I thought, wow, here's the first time that a really beautiful girl is also so much an adventurous.
By March of '75, Marqeaux mania had swept Manhattan. It had become a full-blown epidemic. You couldn't look sideways without meeting Margot's radiant gaze. So the hot-to-trot Miss Hemingway decided to break her contract with Wilhelmina and join the exclusive world of Ford modeling. Then a chance meeting with Fabergé's Richard Barry branded her for life.
Well, at Fabergé, we had started to do a lot of things with celebrities and famous athletes and advertising, especially with Brut Cologne in the early 70s. We decided to come out with a new fragrance line called Babe, sort of a 1970s independent woman, hopefully to be like the next Charlie. And some people that I had met in the industry suggested that I meet Marqeaux Hemingway. There weren't really supermodels as we know them today in those days, but because of her name, her charisma, our fragrance launch, our high profile in the industry, it all fit together into making this the biggest deal ever with a model. Fabergé's new $1 Million Babe.
Marqeaux had just become the highest paid model in history.
No one told me you couldn't start at the top. From that moment on, there seemed to be a lot of champagne and limousines in my life.
This really made the profession a legitimate profession, I think. A Hemingway being a model gave great weight to that industry. The business was a business that was just becoming the phenomena, the model phenomena, where models had names and personalities and were becoming celebrities.
Celebrities indeed. The new beauties, declared Time magazine. And just 275 days after she landed in town, the $1 Million Marqeaux epitomized them all.
I remember my brother phoning me and saying, "You won't believe who's on the cover of Time magazine." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Go buy it. You will not believe it."
At that moment, everything was so heady. I mean, here she's on the cover of Time. She's, you know, she is the most popular 19-year-old in the world. She made everyone feel happy.
Except possibly her family, who had mixed feelings about it all. There was some jealousy among the girls, and also a little fear. After all, the Hemingways were all too familiar with the flip side of fame. But as sentiments at home turned a bit sour, Margot's relationship with Errol grew sweeter. The supermodel and her agent paramour had become very much the super couple. They visited the Plaza Hotel often and strategized their future over Chateau Marqeaux. In June of '75, despite criticism from family and friends, the duo decided to marry.
I couldn't understand why Marqeaux was marrying this person. I just could not understand it because he was definitely...
He was going to make her famous.
Yeah, he was definitely not Margot's man.
Oh gosh, I suppose it's too easy to say that she was the innocent, unsuspecting person and, you know, he was using her or whatever, but I got the distinct impression that he knew very well with whom he was.
I never met anyone like him. He's very sort of spiritual. He's in touch with something, a lot of energy. We're good together because we're total opposites.
Well, there was a genuine love that was there between both Errol and Margot. Errol was there always, you know, guiding her and directing her and managing her, but she did, at that point, really didn't care. I mean, she was so busy. When your life is that busy and all of a sudden, you know, you go from being a young girl who's skiing and hiking and having a good time to becoming a global celebrity literally within 9 months, you don't have time to think.
Despite reservations, the Hemingways accepted the union, and the family flew to Paris for the wedding. The affair was held at the Ritz Hotel, a favorite Hemingway haunt, and the couple honeymooned on the Riviera, until the time came for the bride to return to New York and start earning that million.
You're like no other babe ever born. You're fabulous, babe. You know how to reach out and show your love, babe.
In later months, the fabulous fragrance was launched internationally, and Margot mania spread overseas. So what does $1 Million Babe do for an encore?
I remember this little Italian guy sitting behind this desk saying, "I'm gonna make you a star." I thought they only said that in the movies.
Coming up next.
Marriage, a career, a cover of Time, cover of every fashion magazine, association with a fragrance launch that was very successful, and then the movie, I don't think she was ready for failure.
I've never seen anyone who could consume the amounts of alcohol that she did.
In 1974, in less than a year's time, Margot Hemingway had landed a contract as the highest paid model in history, fallen in love with hamburger heir Errol Wetzel, and become the toast of Manhattan. It wasn't long until Hollywood came courting as well. In 1975, producer Dino De Laurentiis was developing a film called Lipstick, about a beautiful model who avenges her rape and the rape of her sister. Margot was perfect for the lead, so director Lamont Johnson arranged a screen test.
I decided it would be a good idea to have a test in the environment that she knew best. Scavullo, who did most of the great covers in London fashion photographer, was a very highly reputable New York photographer. So we set up a session in New York where he would do a cover session with her.
What would my mother say in Idaho?
Right, Lynette, look right in here.
Can you see my hands at all?
She was always nervous about being photographed until she got into it, you know? And I think when she got the part in the movie, she got a little nervous because it was a great big part and it was a starring role and she'd never acted in her life before.
Well, Margot was always wanted to jump into the deep end of the pool and just assume she could swim. So when she was modeling, everybody was saying, "You've got to become an actress. We want that face of yours up on the screen." And she said, "Okay." Well, that's a very brave step to take, and I admire her for it.
Margot made another brave gesture on behalf of her younger sister.
She showed me a picture of her sister, 13-year-old sister, Marielle. I said, "That's perfect. She's the exact person for your sister in the piece."
She's a star. You think we look alike?
But Marielle was underage, and the studio required a parent chaperone. So in the fall of '75, the Hemingway family went to Hollywood.
They moved into the house in Santa Monica Canyon that was so beautiful. I'll never forget. It was filled with orange trees and avocado trees.
I think of my life as a fairy tale come true. There's magic dust in the air.
Margot went to work in Hollywood, and Hollywood went to work on her, with a fervor reminiscent of the old studio days.
She was groomed meticulously, and she was there was a fortune spent on her the massages, the massage therapists, the hair treatments, the dance exercise classes, the movement exercise, the speech, It worked on her speech a lot.
She had this kind of madcap quality about her, and yet she was a tomboy. She was a real outdoor, rampageous girl. She was kind of hot, thin, and drag, and yet altogether sexually female.
Marqeaux was well liked on the set, but as time passed, her charisma couldn't compensate for her lack of acting experience. Also, the role was becoming more and more uncomfortable for her.
Dino wanted a lot more sensationalism. The more we shot, the more he wanted real graphic, juicy rape stuff and sexy stuff.
By now, millions of dollars were being spent promoting the film. Expectations were high, and so was the pressure.
Let's just say that the pressures were heavier and bigger and more real than ever before in her life. And she was really just scared to death. She couldn't read a script. I had never seen Marqeaux like this. Errol would go off on business, and Marqeaux and I were there, and she'd just order another bottle of champagne.
Some people are built to handle pressure. Some people aren't. When we saw that smiling, fabulous face, I had no idea about the things that haunted her.
In April of '76, the film premiered.
People started to boo about halfway through because of the vulgarity, I mean, the obscenities. And people got up and walked out. And it wasn't Marqeaux. It was dereliction of duty on all our parts.
The film was an utter flop. The critics wrote scathing reviews, panning the movie, condemning the producers, and destroying Marqeaux. Film critic Peter Travers recalls.
Any model that tries to break into movies has to deal with people like me saying, oh, she's a model. Oh, no, not another one. We're going to have another model act. Lipstick wasn't hack work. It had Anne Bancroft in it. So there were expectations. People went to this movie thinking, come on, kid, show me. I want to see what you can do. There wasn't any way for Marqeaux Hemingway to live up to expectations like this, having absolutely no training. It's rare, even today, where you find models breaking in as big as Marqeaux did, where she had to take the starring role in a movie, because they're looking back and they see the lessons of what happened to people like Marqeaux Hemingway.
It's probably all our faults, because we fell in love with her. And we wanted to use her. Not use her, but we wanted to photograph her. We wanted the best for her.
They noticed the little one and not her, so that was tough to take.
They noticed the little one all right. As bad as Margot's reviews were, Mariel's were glowing.
Mariel stole the show. She could put herself into a child's let's pretend mode. I mean, she could sort of really get into a situation and get very stirred by it.
The press anointed Mariel the hot new Hemingway du jour and inflated the sibling rivalry for years.
Her relationship with her sister, which at that time was, extremely healthy, loving, very innocent relationship. And then all of a sudden, the press gets a hold of it and blows it into these ridiculous proportions.
She ended up stealing the movie and deserved the acclaim, but I was upset because it was as if people were tired of me and gave her all the attention.
You know, when you have this enormous rise to the top of fame and fortune, and everybody can't get enough of you, and then the next thing, you're going, hello, I'm over here.
If we're talking about the press, and that's what I do, I'm very aware that, what's hot today is often cold tomorrow. And as much as I dislike the inhumanity of that, it's very much the nature of news. Find me something new.
There was some vindication. Feminist groups actually applauded the film.
An odd thing for flop to be, but nonetheless very influential in terms of other movies copying what that was about. The female Avenger became a major character in movies 5 or 6 years later.
More significantly, the film influenced rape laws in California. A resolution was named in Margot's honor, and Judge Roy Carstairs presented her with a Citizenship Award.
The entire business of rape and the difficulty of convicting the rapist and the difficulties of cross-examination that the victim undergoes was a very hot subject. We gave her the award for bringing to public consciousness what was an immediate, really pressing problem.
After Lipstick, Marqeaux resumed her work for Fabergé. By now, perfume sales were skyrocketing. $13 million the first year alone, and the line was expanded.
After the film, as far as we were concerned, it was business as usual. She was doing new commercials, new print ads for us. She was even more professional as a model.
I think she was struggling to find the next step in her fame. And once you were on, you know, the Babe, well, you know, what do you do after that?
Margot did what she did best, played Margot. She ignited on the New York social scene, gracing every gala and adorning every club.
I was on the fast track with every beautiful person you could shake a stick at. Everyone was lapping up my Hemingwayness.
In April of '77, the beautiful people found their home with the opening of New York's legendary Studio 54. Socialite Nikki Haskell even produced a cable show there.
You know, people used to say to me, where do you live? And I'd say, well, I live at Studio 54, but I keep an apartment on 68th Street.
The great thing about Studio 54, I think, was you had, you know, designers and artists and socialites and Wall Street businessmen all in one area, dancing and partying and having a great time together.
Former Studio 54 owner Ian Schrager.
And that was just when this nightclub era was beginning, and there was an electricity in the air in New York City. So our idea was, why not do a club that catered to all people from all walks of life? And in the same way that you exercise discretion as to who you invite to your home in trying to make for a festive evening and a good party, we tried to exercise that same judgment and discretion for allowing people to come into the club.
The whole country was obsessed with what Studio 54 meant, and how you got in, and how the doorman let you in. And Margot was somebody everybody let in.
The tall blonde goddess got right in, into the club and into the VIP rooms, which soon earned a notorious reputation for drugs and decadence.
She had put our names on the list, and we got, you know, right in. It was overwhelming how big it was. My first thought was, why would Margot want to be in an environment like this? We must have stayed there close to 2.5 hours, sort of taking it all in and waiting for Margot to show up. And I think someone finally told me that she was in a back room and she couldn't be disturbed.
The society at that time was much more into a nightlife, partying mode than they certainly are today. I never saw Margot take drugs, although I know at certain times she would show up, you know, less coherent than others, but that wasn't unusual at that time, really. So that's why maybe the alarms didn't sound.
Alarms didn't sound publicly, but they were reaching the highest decibels privately.
I was in awe of that whole Halston, Liza Minnelli crowd. They were the real celebrities. I was just a girl from Idaho, so I drank to loosen up. In my grandfather's day, it was a virtue to drink a lot.
There was a very small, very quiet, very shy, timid little girl inside of that big, gorgeous body. So it was hard for her, because you'd look in the mirror and see one thing, and inside she didn't feel what she saw.
But the endless partying began to take its toll, and Margot and Errol's marriage fell apart.
She had no boundaries. I've never seen anyone who could consume the amounts of alcohol that she did. And Errol could not control her drinking. I mean, he tried to control her drinking and tried to get Jack involved. He tried to get everybody involved to assist. She just cut him right out.
When we come back,
They can charm the boots off of your legs. Bernard was an unusual, charming man.
And later,
Bernard and myself, I mean, basically we were on the absolute outs.
in the late 70s, Margot's disastrous screen debut in Lipstick, along with her insecurity in the fast lane, drove her deeper and deeper into drink. She divorced her husband, Errol Wetson, and became New York's favorite party girl, until she met Bernardo.
Bernardo was something else. Bernardo is something else. I guess he's Venezuelan, but he came from a French ancestry, and he knew how to live life. He really enjoyed it, and he was friendly, he was happy, he was outgoing, could be brooding and sensitive, and
sexy.
Very, yeah.
That was her guy.
Bernard Pichet, Margot's new love, was a filmmaker, an artist, and like his predecessor, an entrepreneur 16 years her senior. Bernard had also been married before and had children, but it didn't take Marqeaux long to win the affection of his daughter Talia Pichet.
I had a mixture of feelings at that time because my father was married 3 times before her. My father, for me, is my gold. She was so wonderful herself that it wasn't a problem for her to have the gold. She knew how, in a way, to take care of that gold.
I had fallen in love with Bernard. He thrived on adventure. He could go into the middle of the jungle and survive.
And that's exactly where they went. From the jungles to the mountaintops, to the most romantic cities of the world, Marqeaux and Bernard roamed the globe.
Imagine being in the middle of the Amazon, you know, with the Yanomamis painting your face and smelling all the earth and listening to the sounds of the beings that are there.
In 1978, their combined passion for travel and nature led them to produce an award-winning documentary about fly fishing, featuring none other than Margot's dad, Jack. By this time, Margot's Babe contract had ended, and she needed a new source of income. She decided to venture back into Hollywood's rough waters to make another fish story, Killer Fish with Lee Majors and Karen Black. The reviews were tepid at best. Meanwhile, Sister Mariel was on her own private fast track to the stars.
Mariel just didn't go off and do another movie that was successful. She went off and did Manhattan for Woody Allen. And then to top all that off, and what an effect this must have had on Marqeaux, Mariel gets an Academy Award nomination as Best Supporting Actress. Mariel was really fortunate that she followed that up with movies like Personal Best and Star 80. So she's working for Robert Towne and Bob Fosse. This is Hollywood's creme de la creme. Margot Hemingway is still stuck doing things like Killer Fish. She's in hack Hollywood work.
But at that time, Marqeaux was preoccupied by her life with Bernard. On a snowy New Year's Eve in 1979, the two were wed in Ketchum. Shortly after the nuptials, the couple moved to Paris and Provence for a honeymoon that lasted nearly 2 years.
Bernard had a wonderful 13th century castle in Provence that they had been living in, and those were very romantic times. I don't think Marqeaux, you know, drank as much.
We went to the south of France, which was the first time I'd ever taken my camera crew and everybody, and we sort of trucked over to Europe for the Cannes Film Festival. We went to this big, it was more than a mansion, it was a castle. And they had a big party in this castle, and Marqeaux was there. I know that that's the first time that I had interviewed her.
Thank you for coming on our show.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And join us next week at this time.
Okay.
Marqeaux and Bernard.
During this time, Marqeaux and Bernard decided to produce a documentary film about Ernest Hemingway, revisiting his famous haunts. But their first challenge was to finance the project. So they met with investors Andrew and Jan Ippolito.
It was April 1982 because I recall when we met Marqeaux, it was raining and it was Paris in the rain.
I liked her immediately. She has that type of personality that is very charismatic, I would say. Very friendly, very American.
Bernard was probably the typical European playboy. He could charm the boots off of your legs. Bernard was an unusual, charming man. I became fascinated by the project itself. Marqeaux in search of Grandpapa, in search of Hemingway.
I wanted to make the first truly good movie about Ernest Hemingway. I wanted the world to know that he wasn't just a macho man.
Andrew Ippolito agreed to raise the money for the film, and Marqeaux and Bernard returned to the States to assist in the effort.
They came to live with me, and this was in Los Angeles. They came to live with me briefly, and then they got some money somehow. It was always this thing about money.
With financial pressures bearing down on them, Marqeaux decided to take parts in 2 more B films, Over the Brooklyn Bridge with Elliot Gould, and the martial arts spoof, They Call Me Bruce.
What's your plan this time, Rover?
You know, I love you just before you get slapped.
Finally, enough money had been raised to start production on the Ernest Hemingway documentary.
We went in their offices once in Santa Monica while they were making it. They had a huge crew working with people everywhere, stuff going on, but I don't know if any of it was organized.
But organized or not, in the fall of 1983, the crew set out in search of Papa. And since Marqeaux would be conducting interviews with her grandfather's prominent friends, she decided to take a crash course in his prose.
She had a paperback of A Moving Feast, which is one of Hemingway's most distinguished books and writings. And because of her dyslexia, Marqeaux never got into it. She didn't know how famous her grandfather was.
The crew started their European travel in Venice, where Margot's father, Jack, joined the party. Then they made their way to Paris. On the surface, it was quite a romantic journey, rich in culture and history. But below the surface, trouble was brewing.
It's so romantic, Bernard. This was a very social film where we were going places, and it does seem like it revolved around a lot of drinking, and possibly so. However, Marqeaux did like to drink. She enjoyed it tremendously, and she had a great capacity for alcohol. But it didn't affect her. I wouldn't say that it did. None whatsoever. She was up early. She did what she was told to do. She was very congenial, very professional.
But the team was shooting on an intense schedule, getting little sleep and spending lots of money. The pressures became overwhelming.
We had all the media chasing us. Everyone knew that Hemingway was in town. Television stations, newspapers, and articles began to appear in the paper. And I accused Bernard of selling out. I accused him of perhaps giving too much information to the paper, because we really didn't want to have all these hanger-ons. We found ourselves with not only our crew, but more than 100 and 150 people. Bernard and Marqeaux were at that point in their relationship where it became awfully strained.
There are different moments in life when you are strong and you can take anything from the media. If you don't feel well, you know, if you are in a transition that you're thinking about, you know, why you're here, it's hard to have the media also questioning you.
The tension between the two of them permeated throughout the whole crew, and it affected everybody, because the two of them were at each other's throats. It became very difficult for everyone to put on a happy face.
Something must have been brewing before that. As we traveled, sometimes you get to know people in a different way.
Culturally, they were worlds apart. He was an intellect who loved to read and write. Marqeaux loved to have fun.
The fun came to a definitive end in Pamplona, Spain. The running of the Bulls Festival is an annual ritual which Hemingway popularized in his writing. For a week straight at sunrise, thousands try to outrun a pack of charging bulls. Then they party all day in triumph.
Hemingway quotes and distinctly says that, "Never take your wife to Pamplona. You may lose her to a better man." And in some ways, Marqeaux was lost to a better man, to Ernest himself.
Bernard and myself, I mean, basically we were on the absolute outs. We were arguing. I was with, this is not very, well.
I don't know, I'm getting crazy. Too many, I don't understand. There's too much booze, too much people, too much confusion.
On their last day in Pamplona, Marqeaux and Bernard were to film a dramatic bullfight. But Marqeaux went alone.
Marqeaux had never seen a bullfight before. She didn't know how to conduct herself because the bullfighter dedicated the bull to Marqeaux. By that time, Bernard was gone. And she cried. That scene in which she cries was when she saw the bull killed. For her, it was the killing of an animal, not the skill of a bullfighter.
Blood was coming from the bull's nose. He stumbled and died slowly. I was upset because it seemed like what was happening in my life.
When we return,
I never really knew at the time how bad her drinking problem was. But we would go out for lunch. I didn't realize that she would drink before we got to lunch.
What were her priorities? You know, was it champagne and limousines, or was it backpacking in the mountains?
during the early 80s, Marqeaux met and married the love of her life, Bernard Fouché. The two embarked on an ambitious documentary about Ernest Hemingway, but the project failed, and so did the marriage. In the fall of 1984, after a painful breakup with Bernard, Marqeaux returned to Idaho, seeking consolation from her family. But she met with mixed feelings instead.
The kind of lives that you've chosen are tough on you. Because I mean, I saw what effect fame had on Papa, both in a positive and negative way. It seems to me I heard that you or Marielle or both of you at some point said, "Don't worry, Daddy, I'll never change." But you do.
Marielle was off preparing for her upcoming marriage to Steve Chrisman, manager of New York's Hard Rock Cafe, and Margot's efforts to connect with her older sister, Muffet, who by now was married herself, were also unsuccessful.
When are you going to play tennis with me?
Yeah, I'll play any time. I want you to stay, and I'd play tennis with you every day.
Well,
Great.
so far it's been 3 days, and every morning you struck down. Well, I can't.
You
You gotta
can't
eat
play.
something.
If you play at 9 o'clock in the morning, Margot, it's icy out there. You freeze to death. The ball won't even bounce.
That winter, Marqeaux decided to escape to the Austrian Alps for a holiday ski vacation. But the mountains got the better of her. She fell, cracked her pelvic bone and several vertebrae, and was rushed into emergency surgery.
And I remember she called me from the hospital in Switzerland, and she said, "Oh, well, I missed a mogul, and I broke my, And what was bad at that time is that she started really using, the prescription drugs and the painkillers and drinking in the hospital. And so she was constantly trying to anesthetize this pain and fill this hole up, this emptiness inside.
For the next 6 weeks, Marqeaux lay bedridden in a friend's London apartment, becoming more and more bloated with drink. Divorce procedures were underway with Bernard, and in her despair, her thoughts turned to her grandfather and suicide.
He loved life. I mean, if you can't drink anymore, if you can't write in your best hand, which he obviously did, if you can't enjoy love anymore, the love of a woman, the love of the outdoors, I mean, I justify it.
Margot's fast lane lifestyle had finally landed her in a ditch. On top of all her personal pain, the IRS smacked her with a $900,000 bill for back taxes. Her only source of income was foreign films and commercials.
Usted no reconoce la tarjeta American Express.
American Express, la tarjeta más respetada. Still determined to pull herself up and out of her hole, Marqeaux moved back to New York.
I was shocked. I'd never seen Marqeaux, huge. I was so sad for her. I felt my heart, I'd never seen her this big before.
I never really knew at the time how bad her drinking problem was. But we would go out for lunch. I didn't realize that she would drink before we got to lunch.
I was on a merry-go-round of restaurants and wine lists, Bordeaux Reds and Bordeaux Whites. I would tell people that I was busy, but all I was doing was painting abstracts at home.
You know, when you're Marqeaux Hemingway, it's hard for her to retrench. She was an icon. I mean, everybody knew her name throughout the world. The fact that she wasn't working was irrelevant. You know, I mean, you'd say Marqeaux Hemingway, they would put her in the same category as Elizabeth Taylor and Sophia Loren and very famous, prominent women of our day. So she could not live up to her own identity.
When you become famous and the world adores you, everything is thrown at you. I mean, and the whole world embraces you, and that hotness is almost frightening. very few people have handled it well. What were her priorities? You know, was it champagne and limousines, or was it backpacking in the mountains?
But even as Marqeaux struggled to find herself, she never lost the charisma that attracted new friends, like Linda Livingston and Gigi Gaston.
I met Marqeaux at Millie Kaiserman's. She would go down to hear Millie sing, and Millie would hand her the mic, and she would sing along with Millie and rock the house.
I met her with Millie, and she was singing. The way her voice would envelop you, her heart enveloped you. And she was a giver, and she was very lost when I met her.
I think she was always hoping that around the next corner, her knight in shining armor would come and take her away from all this. But then she's not the only woman that feels that way.
And for a brief time, a bright knight did come along. His name was Stuart Sunderland. He was a lawyer, a financier, and the son of the governor of Rhode Island.
A friend of mine said, we're all going to have lunch in the Russian tea room. I said, sounds like a nice idea. Marqeaux was there. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and we sat down and started liking each other, and had a glass of vodka and had some oysters, and I sort of never looked back. I had my apartment, she had her apartment, but eventually we sort of, you know, clothes began to move, and then more clothes begin to move, and then you realize you don't have much left at the other place. So you end up living together.
Stuart's a great guy. He was there when he came in, I think, a year after I met Marqeaux, during the hard times, and he was so there for her. He really, really loved Marqeaux.
She was so down at that time. I mean, she needed someone to really help her get to that point where she could go into a detoxification program. She was just very toxic, and it did affect the epilepsy, and she really was trying to push that under the rug and thinking, well, I'll take this small dosage of phenobarbital every day and it's going to control things.
But it didn't control things. Marqeaux's alcohol-related seizures became more frequent and more intense until one frightful day she nearly bit off her tongue.
I decided that it had been a message to get well or I would die. I called the Betty Ford Center. My parents paid for the treatment. I checked in and I spelled my name, Marqeaux, G-O-T.
Coming up next.
Oh, you know, group therapy, and you're like on the hot seat and everything, and I started sweating inside and going, you know, like an acting class or something like this, and I got really scared, and I went, I think that we have a lot to deal with here.
The late 80s was the darkest period in Marqeaux Hemingway's life. Depressed over her second divorce and financial woes, she drowned herself in drink until an alcohol-related seizure almost killed her. She decided to get help. In January 1988, 28 days after she checked in, Marqeaux checked out of the Betty Ford Center, sober. She immediately launched an intensive health and fitness regimen, determined to shed her excess weight.
It's a major psychological, physical change, and you know, it's they have various sayings. Betty Ford, change your place and change your players, so you don't go back to the same old habits. So I think that, you know, she really was very disciplined about her exercise, and you know, she didn't drink at all. And
Marqeaux also launched another campaign, which she kept up for the rest of her life, confessing her sins and healing others. Marqeaux preached the virtues of sobriety on the lecture circuit, in print articles, on the networks, tabloids, and talk shows, even the BBC.
I wanted everything that they had to offer, the 12 steps and all this stuff, and it was very important to me to get this, because it was like, because before I went in there, it was either, okay, I can kill myself. Yeah. It seemed like a pretty good option, but there's one idea, maybe I'll try life again.
Not only did Marqeaux discuss her alcoholism, but she finally spoke openly about her ongoing battle with bulimia, impressing colleagues like model Kim Alexis.
In our business,
no one really says, how'd you get that thin? Do you throw up? Do you just starve yourself? What do you do? And I think that when she talked about it on these shows, she probably helped herself by helping these other people, by her talking about it and being able to get it out in the open.
And producer Ronnie Stoller.
She was willing, more so than anyone I'd ever seen, to expose the most vulnerable, most painful, and what could potentially be the most damaging aspects of her life.
I shouldn't go around thinking I'm the Messiah or anything, but it just that, you know, she felt that she had a presence and she had a name and people would pay attention. We used to get lots of letters just saying, you know, I saw your article, I saw you on this show, I saw you on that show, and, you know, it changed me and made me be able to confront my problems, and, you know, obviously it had an impact.
Marqeaux had regained her self-pride, as well as her family's approval.
She went through hell. The fact that she, you know, quit drinking and taking drugs or whatever she was doing is extraordinary and really hard, and I really commend her for that because it's not an easy task.
Once trim again, Marqeaux was eager to resurrect her modeling career, but the fashion world was not so receptive.
Marqeaux used the press as a form of therapy. You know, she didn't have these boundaries. She didn't know where to stop. And she would bare her soul, which I think was very beautiful. An image maker doesn't want to know about a person's grief. They want to hear all the great things so that they can again sensationalize and create these omnipotent images.
Despite her sobriety and the weight loss, something was missing.
In the 80s, she called me and asked me could I do new pictures of her. She wanted to start her modeling career again. And when she came in and I tried to photograph her, I saw then that something was happening to her. And it made me very sad. She wasn't the same.
In June of '88, Margot's mother died after a long bout with cancer. Marqeaux had never been close to her mom, and friend Sandy Mirisch remembered how she struggled with her feelings.
Her mother wanted her to be there. And maybe that's what the separation and not communicating was for a while. But I know the last of Puck's life, Marqeaux really had quality time with her.
Back in New York, Marqeaux finally gave up on the fashion world and tried to find work in other areas. She recorded an unreleased single and dabbled in art.
From an artistic point of view, she used to do lots of collages, which were, you know, wonderful combinations of color and images. Also, she was dyslexic, so, you know, dyslexics have their own sort of twist. They don't see things in a logical way. And many great artists are dyslexic because they have this different way of viewing things.
Then Marqeaux tried the stage.
She got offered this play, The Women, which is a great play, at the Star Theater in Flint, Michigan, which is a very well-known regional theater. It was a terrific cast of seasoned actresses, all women. You know, we worked on the lines a lot, and she got it. It was just confidence building. She realized she could do it, and she did. Did a very good job, got very good reviews, and liked it.
But Marqeaux still needed a more lucrative means to make those IRS payments.
Margot's accomplishments with her bankruptcy were what kept her going. She loved being able to pay off the IRS. I mean, she had so much pride in that.
Failing to find work in New York, Marqeaux decided to move to LA, rekindling old friendships.
No, I'm having a good time in LA.
But distancing herself from Stuart.
I think we always loved each other, but she had things that she wanted to do, and after Betty Ford, grow and experience, and I did too, and so, like many people who were completely connected forever, it doesn't always work in a couple relationship.
I liked Stuart. I liked her boyfriend, Stuart. I thought he was very nice. He was very proper, and he was a good influence on her. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He came from a very fine family. But she always felt for some hippie type, you know, that was making candles up in the wine country. She was a dreamer, and dreamers always gravitate towards other dreamers.
Once in LA, Marqeaux was really dreaming of landing herself some choice acting work. She and her new manager, David Mirisch, decided to show Hollywood just how fit and photogenic she was by posing for Playboy.
She was not in any way embarrassed the fact that she had posed nude for Playboy. She felt that this was an opportunity for her to let the world see that she was beautiful, and overcome all those comments that Margot did not look good, Margot had been this, Margot had been that.
She said, well, I want you involved, and I want you to participate in helping me do this shoot. So I said, let's go to Belize in Central America. There's beautiful water, beaches, fabulous old boats, and a lot of jungle, and it's a heavy-duty rainforest adventure trip. And when the plane was landing in Belize, the whole plane is filled with Belizeans, and the cockpit opens and the captain asks Margot to come in to watch this beautiful landing. And Margot's going, Yahoo, Yahoo, like this. And the whole plane starts to applaud with her and goes, Hemingway, Hemingway, Hemingway.
Playboy editor Marilyn Grabowski worked with her on the layout.
I think at the time she did Playboy, she was very positive. It takes a great deal of positivity, believe me, to think of taking your clothes off or in front of strangers. And she was nervous and she was trepidatious, but she seemed in a very, very good place.
Margot certainly garnered a lot of press from the layout, but no big parts.
I think that Margot's a better celebrity than she was an actress. I think that knowing her and then seeing her in a movie are two different things. The camera never captured the magic that you got in person.
Finally, in 1991, unable to keep up with her bills, Margot filed for bankruptcy and started to seriously assess her future.
I think Margot wanted to have a family. I think she wanted to get married again and settle down and be in love again, like all of us do.
Meanwhile, Margot's father, Jack, had remarried. Mariel was starting a family of her own. And Muffet, now divorced, was battling mental illness. Margot felt she could get closer to her family by confronting some of the issues between them.
One of her best lines was, you're sick as your secrets. That's one of those AA things. And I imagine there was a lot of secrets in that family. I'm not real sure, but she was always trying to find the truth.
The reality of Margot's past became clear to her, and she felt honesty would set things right. Denouncing her grandfather's legacy, she spoke out for animal rights.
That's why I actively support the Humane Society in the United States in its efforts to give animals their rightful place in the world. After all, it's their world, too.
She publicly disclosed that she was an epileptic and worked with director Jackie Vella to educate others about the disease.
She spoke openly about her epilepsy, which is pretty unusual for the entertainment community. It's been several decades since anyone has, and especially in recent years since my time, that I can remember any entertainer that has openly said, I have epilepsy.
And then, in a stunning revelation, she confessed she had been sexually abused as a child by her godfather. But for the Hemingways, people of action, not introspection, this was one confession too many.
The man was dead who, you know, who supposedly did these things to her, and, you know, her family did not embrace her at all.
Instead of moving closer to her family, Margot moved further apart.
She wasn't doing it to hurt her family. She just needed to get it out for herself so she could go on with her life.
When we come back...
They must have given her something, some kind of an elixir of the gods or something. But she flipped out completely.
In late 1993, Margot made a series of public confessions concerning her troubled past, revealing that she had allegedly been sexually abused by her godfather. She astonished and alienated her family. Unable to turn to them, she tried to turn to God. Margot's spiritual quest took her around the world many times, often with friends like Linda Livingston.
She would go to Hawaii and meet all the spiritual people in Hawaii that she could meet. She would go to Europe. She went to India to search out Sai Baba. I mean, she was really trying to find her spiritual side. And that's one thing we did love about her.
Margot would leave all of us at our activities and go out on the beach, and she would sit there for hours whistling to the seagulls, sort of communicating with them.
She always used to go away on these treks, and she would go to, there was a place I think that you go to up in Wyoming, some place that's where you go to what, they're Indians, and they put you down in a pit, and you sit there for 4 days, and you get in touch with yourself.
I loved all the little kooky things she did. It was always something. Next time you met her, she was doing something that was like so way out. Like, you know, you would be like meditating over your food, and she would be like, oh, no, I sprinkled this over my food.
While Margot's journeys revived her spiritually, they did little to relieve her financial woes.
Marqeaux needed money to exist. She was never kept by a gentleman. She did not live with male roommates. She always supported herself. So we had to keep looking for ways to make money.
By now, Margot's hopes of landing Hollywood work had waned. So she agreed to make a movie with Argentine filmmaker Eduardo Montes.
She was very much into the spiritual energy, but I don't know how much of it was Hollywood, how much of it was herself, the heavy weight of the name she carried, and how much all of that was a refuge.
Marqeaux had conceded that as far as acting, she had only her name to offer.
We bought a last name that would sell. I think it's terrible.
She abandoned all hope of finding meaningful work in L.A. and retreated again to her beloved Idaho to write her memoirs.
She could be outgoing and wonderful, but if she was hurting, she wasn't around. She was hurting alone somewhere, and I think she hurt a lot at the end.
Occasionally, Marqeaux left her snug hideaway to substitute for her father on a local nature show.
Hi, I'm Marqeaux Hemingway. Welcome to incredible Idaho. My father, Jack, who's using the age-old excuse to play hooky, has gone fishing.
In November 1994, Marqeaux embarked on her most ambitious spiritual quest.
She told me that she wanted to go to India and that she really wanted to go on this search her soul, and I think that was the beginning of the end.
Marqeaux traveled to an isolated ashram in India to meet spiritual leader Sai Baba. Friends and family lost contact with her. Then, in December of '94, she mysteriously resurfaced in her birth city of Portland, Oregon. Her head had been shaven, and she claimed to hear voices.
I remember getting a call from Marqeaux. She said, well, I just got back from India, and I cleared off 10,000 lifetimes, and I ended up in jail.
They must have given her something, some kind of an elixir of the gods or something, but she flipped out completely.
Margot's family retrieved her from Portland and committed her to a mental home in Blackfoot, Idaho. After observing her for several weeks, her doctors decided to strengthen her epilepsy medication. The side effects were debilitating, and Marqeaux would often experiment with the dosages.
There are side effects to all medications, and of course there are side effects to anti-epilepsy medications. Some of the different side effects can be depression, irritability.
Upon release from the clinic, Marqeaux stunned her friends by heading back to L.A.
I just assumed that she would be more comfortable or happier in Idaho, but who knows what demons followed her around every day? Who knows if she shook them when she was in the backwoods or not?
Marqeaux actually found tranquility in the Los Angeles landscape. She took rigorous hikes in the mountains and long, soul-searching walks by the beach, often stealing friends from their work to join her.
Marqeaux and I did a lot of things together. We'd go hiking a lot. Hiking with Marqeaux was always an interesting adventure because nobody could keep up with Marqeaux.
And the city also offered many alternative ministries for Marqeaux to explore with like-minded friends like Reverend Bill Minson.
She was looking really at having a life without a lot of the confusion that these issues that she was going through, but most looking to be a larger part of what God's plan was.
I pray every day. I say thank you to God and the universe.
But of course, there was the never-ending quest to make a living. In mid-1995, Marqeaux took a part in the low-budget film Dangerous Cargo with Rosemary Belden. But she had trouble during shooting
She couldn't sleep at night. So she would ask, between takes even, Eric, could I lay down, you know? And he'd let her, and it would cause us delays, of course. I must say she was very cheerful. Like the minute she got up again, she'd be there, and she'd always have her lines. Russian for this. But I think we had the most fun together, let's say, in the shootout, just because, you know, we're both not the youngest, and yet here we got to run around and do things and act like stuntmen, you know.
Despite her own health problems, Marqeaux was still zealous about healing others. She appeared in a substance abuse infomercial with Dr. Brian Allman.
I'm someone with incredible willpower. And let me tell you, that part of me, the part of me that kept giving in to the addiction would win over and over again.
She said that I really want to do this because I suffered for so long and I went to so many programs and I tried so many things that I wasted a lot of years.
Marqeaux was also enthusiastic about a pending sportswear and fragrance venture with her new agent, Graham Kay.
She wasn't really interested in doing films. The money was great, and you know, Marqeaux would be the first one to admit to you that she said, "Look, Graham," she said, "you know, I'm never going to do Ordinary People." You know, she said, "I may not even do Savannah." She didn't take herself too seriously, but when Marqeaux was modeling, she was a real pro.
But then Marqeaux did land an extraordinary role.
I'm Marqeaux Hemingway, and this is Wild Guide. I'm the Wild Guide, of course. Makes perfect sense. And it's about endangered species. So far, we've shot about the manatees and crocodiles and certain snakes.
Wild Guide producer Ray Donahue was thrilled with his new show host.
She just said, you know, this is the kind of thing that I live for. This is what I've been looking for. This is the type of show that is what I really want to do. So I felt instantly I felt she was right for it because I knew she had the excitement for it, and that's the most important thing.
But again, enthusiasm could not compensate for Margot's medical problems.
It was a great segment that we did in Florida with her and the manatees, but she got really sick and she got the shivers, and I think she actually had a little mild seizure, an epileptic seizure. We still went to the locations, but we didn't take Marqeaux. She was under a lot of medication. She had a lot of medication she was taking. And the medication, apparently, that she was taking wasn't mixing well with other medication.
You know, it made her feel, like she said, less than human. She knew that she would be in conversations and all of a sudden she would veer off and she would lose track of what was going on. And that was a result of the medication.
In mid-1996, in perhaps an effort to rekindle their relationship, Marqeaux journeyed to Venezuela for a visit with her ex-husband, Bernard Fouché.
I'm going down there for to do a commercial on the island of Margarita, which will be fun, with an old beau of mine, which was my ex-husband.
But too much time had come between them, and a reunion was not to be, according to Bernard's daughter, Talia.
You know, it's like you don't have a relationship after you split. When you love somebody for so many years, so dearly, so passionate, like they loved each other, you'll never forget about that.
Marqeaux returned to L.A. and in June decided to bolster her spirits with a change of scenery. She found a studio apartment just steps from the sand of Santa Monica Beach.
She hadn't been happy in the apartment that she lived at. But the other thing was she always wanted to be near the ocean.
But even in this quaint community, Marqeaux could not find peace. The tenants below her kept late hours, and there was friction between Marqeaux and her landlady. No sooner had Marqeaux moved in, she was asked to leave. On Thursday, June 27, 1996, perhaps feeling rootless and a bit lonely, Marqeaux comforted herself by joining friends at a Hollywood night spot.
She came to hear Millie sing at Cicada, and she came into the back room where Millie was singing, and Millie handed her the mic, and she sang, and she looked beautiful. She was incredible. She spent the night with me that night because the night before somebody was doing a movie in her house.
That night, Marqeaux had her most restful sleep in days. She awoke at 7 a.m. and left for a hike in the mountains. When we return,
Sometimes when you don't hear from Marqeaux, you know, you figure she's off, you know, gallivanting with one of her spiritual friends, you know, and she'll be back.
Throughout 1995 and 96, Marqeaux Hemingway experienced a lot of personal highs and lows. She was genuinely excited about new projects, but continually plagued by medical problems and loneliness.
I called Marqeaux Saturday twice and left 2 messages because she was upset about the apartment, that she had to find a new apartment. And then, was it you who told me that she'd put a deposit down on another apartment, that she found another apartment? So I thought, okay, so everything's fine. And then Monday morning, I called Judy, and I said something, I just woke up with a vibe, and I said something weird has happened. And so Judy said, well, let's go over, and she went over first, thank God.
On Monday, July 1st, Judy Stabile, an artist and friend, drove over to Margot's apartment. When no one answered, she called a worker to break in, and her friend Gigi for support. At the age of 41, Marqeaux Hemingway was dead. The cause was uncertain, but police said there were no signs of foul play and no evidence of suicide. Toxicology tests were ordered. The entire world was shocked and saddened, and a media blitz ensued. Marqeaux was found just 1 day shy of the 35th anniversary of her grandfather's suicide. The tabloids were ablaze in speculation.
When a Hemingway dies early, the media wants to think it's suicide. And they don't want to think that she died of natural causes or it was an accidental death. They want it to be a suicide.
Marqeaux was cremated, and her ashes were buried in the shadow of her famous forebearer during a private memorial service in Ketchum.
Marielle was wonderful.
Marielle was beautiful.
Yeah, she was really wonderful.
You could see the love she had for her sister.
And Jack was, well, he did the best he could. He acted like a gentleman, but I know it hurt him a lot to lose her. The thing that I find is strange is I guess she was cremated, and then she was entombed. And I can't, I mean,
to us, that's just
if you're cremated, your ashes could be spread. And then,
she was a free spirit. Her ashes should be spread all over this valley.
A second service for her friends was held at the Agape Church in L.A., and a memorial fund was set up with the Epilepsy Society. Then, 7 weeks later, on August 21st, the findings were released. The coroner ascribed Margot's death to acute phenobarbital intoxication based on high concentrations in her vital organs and ruled it a suicide. Spokesman Scott Carrier explained their decision.
Because of the decomposition factors, we weren't able to obtain a sample of blood. So we had to do extraction from liver, brain, and kidney. We weren't able to tell you how many tablets were, no, we can't do that. If we had a blood sample, chances are we would be able to give you an estimate number.
Marqeaux was the 5th person in 4 generations of Hemingways to die by their own hand.
Well, I think the doctor reflected, if I'm not mistaken in the opinion, that there was some family history of her having this, but I think the overwhelming factor is the presence of the large quantity of phenobarbital.
Margot's friends, however, questioned how much family history weighed in the coroner's decision and voiced their doubts to this day.
I just find it hard to believe that she could have done that intentionally. Without leaving a note of some kind or having some kind of a more spiritual setting.
Marqeaux just wasn't good with taking medicines correctly. She was the kind of person where she was feeling great, she didn't take it at all, even if she was supposed to. And if she was feeling terrible, she would either take too much or switch them around.
I know this sounds insane, but I mean, did she take 3 doses that day, or you know what I mean? Or was she weak? Had she dieted so much that it just got her? I mean, why didn't she leave a note?
Marqeaux was not the kind of person that would intentionally do something. She would do it by accident. And I don't agree with the coroner of Los Angeles, whatever he says.
Others, however, had different emotions.
To me, it's a little bit more than that. You don't let someone, and I get very angry about this, you don't let someone who is, by this point, having serious mental disorders that are not being, this is apart from the epilepsy, that are not being medically addressed alone.
I don't want to be dramatic about it, but I really do believe that she died of a broken heart.
Broken heart, suicide, overdose, an accident. What killed Marqeaux? We all did.
Regardless of how she died, the world had lost a magnificent woman.
Ultimately, the most important thing to remember is what she gave to everybody that experienced her in this life, not how she left it.
Her stature was such that she could walk into any room and command attention. But her humility was such that she could walk into any room and hold anyone's hand.
I'm so happy to have known her all those years, because she really helped me in my life of growing too.
And I just wish I had never, not taken her for granted, but I never thought I'd be living without her. You know, so cherish your friends.
That Friday she died, and we were doing our usual talking in the hot tub, and all of a sudden I went, "Oh my God, David." I said, "Oh, he's going what?" I said, "The biggest shooting star I ever saw, going straight down." And that's typical Marqeaux. She would want to say goodbye.
I believe in rolling with the punches. You have to keep fighting. That's what life is all about. Rolling with the punches and leading with your heart.